You're stuck at home in quarantine. 5 o'clock. Why not have a drink with me?
Hello, happy Sunday. Good to be with you today. Hope you're doing well. Looks like we've got Tom in the chat. Hey, Dad, how you doing? Happy Mother's Day today. Hope all the mothers out there are doing well. Had a good day today. Pretty quiet. Did a few things around the house. Did a bike ride. But nothing crazy to report. Helen was very busy. Helen was very active doing some organization projects in the kitchen, which I quite appreciate. She got some new bins for all of our miscellaneous produce. So now our garlic and onions and lemons and limes and apples and eggplants, everything that doesn't go in the refrigerator has a better home for it out of the cabinet. She also organized our coffee cabinet, which was a mess, which is mostly my fault. So thanks to her for fixing that for us. Had an interesting thing happen to me, which is I got a letter from our auto insurance company. And I opened this letter expecting it just to be a typical, like, here's your bill, or here's your payment, or your policy's up for renewal, or whatever, like we get every so often. And so I open it up, and the insurance company basically says, hey, we haven't been having many accidents lately, nobody's really driving, so we are going to refund 15% of your premiums for the months of April and May. So that was a nice thing that happened to us. It's not a ton of money, but it's I think it works out to around $30 a month over 2 months. So I don't know if that's $60. I can buy a nice bottle of Scotch or something like that. Looks like we've got Roger in the chat. Hello, Roger. And Helen joined from upstairs. Helen, a moment ago, I gave you a nice shout out for all the great work that you did in our kitchen today. I'm really excited about our cleaned up coffee cabinet and also our produce storage area, which is much improved because of your hard and focused work. So thank you, Helen, for that. And so today we're going to be making some stuff with some Scotch. In the 1890s, people started drinking Scotch some more, and it really aligns with the import of golf into the United States in the late 1800s. And people were starting to get all crazy about golf, and they were like, what other things are they doing over there in Scotland that we should do? And there were some astute distillers and marketing folks who took advantage of this new interest in all things Scottish, especially my man Tommy Dewar. And they started to, market Scotch in the 1890s to American audience. And there aren't a ton of really good Scotch cocktails. I feel like, first of all, most people are drinking their Scotch straight up, neat on some ice, but not mixing it up with too much. But also, people are... it's not an easy ingredient to work with because it's so variable from one Scotch to another for starters, but the intense smokiness and the peatiness is really hard to really stand up to a lot of other ingredients. Looks like we have Megan join the chat. Hello, Megan. Happy Mother's Day to you. Megan, the mother of 2 adorable young children, Abby and Liam. And so we're going to be doing 2 things with Scotch today. Excuse me. First thing we're going to be doing is making a Scotch Highball. So the Scotch Highball actually became one of the most fashionable drinks after this explosion of Scotch on the market in the 1890s. By the year 1900, really, it is the fashionable drink to be drinking in America, the Scotch Highball. And another thing happened about 30 years later, which is in the 1920s, the Japanese sent a couple scientists over to Scotland and were like, hey, how do you do this whole Scotch thing? And they learned, and then they brought it back to Japan and created this this market of Japanese whiskey, which is still a thing, and an exciting thing. And I've had some Japanese whiskey. It's a great product. I think it can be as good as the Scotch. Doesn't have as much of the like 400-year history, but I think it's cool that they just kind of went out there and were figured it out and figured we can do it ourselves. Roger's saying better not use single malt. Ho ho! We use what we have. So the other thing about the Japanese is, like many things, they have very particular ritualistic ways of doing things. And the nice thing about the highball, the Scotch highball, is that it's not a cocktail, right? It's basically just another way of expressing and drinking the flavors of the Scotch in a longer drink. And so it can be a really interesting way to start to really get to know the different elements and characteristics of the Scotch that you're drinking. So I'm going to grab some ice to make this highball. And the highball is really just your spirit and soda water, and that's it. Once you start adding other stuff to it, it starts to become other things, right? So if you start to add like lemon juice to it, now it's like a gin Ricky or a Collins, or there's all these other directions that it can go. But anyway, here's how the Japanese do their Scotch highball, which is start out with some ice, and if I had the proper ice molds, I would have just one long sphere. That's one of my goals for the summer, is to get my hands on one of those. But the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to take the ice and just stir it empty around the glass to start to chill the glass. That's the first thing that they're going to do. And get that glass nice and cold for our Scotch highball. Now the next thing they're going to do is they're going to use this ice, but they're going to dump out any water that melted in there. So we're left with just our ice here. Next, we are going to put in the Scotch. So I'm going to be using this Balvenie Caribbean cask 14-year Scotch that Helen really liked. She went to a Scotch tasting. This was her favorite one. We got a bottle. It's very nice for sipping. Not too peaty, a little bit oaky. It's very nice. So I'm just going to take 2 ounces of the Scotch and pour it on my ice. Now here's where the Japanese rituals get interesting. So what they'll do, if you get a highball in Japan, at least at a fancy whiskey bar, is they will then stir this on the ice clockwise 13 and a half times. Like so. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 and a half. 13 and a half times. Now what we're going to do is we're going to top it with some soda water. I just made some soda water in my soda stream. I got it extra fizzy. I want this to be kind of like really, really carbonated. And I'm going to put in, I want to put in like I use 2 ounces of Scotch, about 3 ounces of soda water. Getting this proportion about right is important, otherwise it's going to be too watered down. So pour that right on top. Like that. And then the last thing that they'll do is they'll give it another stir, only this time it's still clockwise, but it's going to be 3.5 times stirring. 1, 2, 3.5, and we're done. And there we have our Scotch highball. Throw in a straw, give it a taste. quite good. Actually, for people that like are interested in maybe getting into Scotch, but don't have a ton of drinking experience, and just drinking Scotch neat can really be sort of off-putting and strong, and you're not used to the alcohol, and it's getting up your nose. This is a really nice way to try different Scotches in a way that makes the flavors really accessible, but you're not getting all the burning if you're not used to just drinking your spirits neat. So it's quite refreshing. The Japanese wouldn't do this, but it's also really nice if you want to take just a little bit of lemon zest for a garnish. I don't think it needs it, but that wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world. And there we go, a nice long drink, as they say, because you have it diluted with the soda water, and you can sip on this over your dinner. So the other classic cocktail that we're gonna make with Scotch, if you were to say, like, name a cocktail that has Scotch, the most famous one is probably the Rob Roy. Now, rumor has it that there's this bar in Hoboken, New Jersey, in the middle of the 1890s, and at this bar, it was towards the end of the night, and they had one of these guys who was working for the Scotch distribution company was making his rounds, and it got to this bar, and at the bar they were about to serve up a round of Manhattans. And it said that this distiller had some ethical quandary about, I don't think that I should drink anything that isn't featuring, my product. I'm trying to push this Scotch whiskey on people. So I want to make sure that I have a drink that uses Scotch. And they said, okay, that's no problem. Let's just swap out the rye that we were going to use in this Manhattan for some Scotch, and then you'll be all set. And that's allegedly how the Rob Roy was born. They submitted this recipe to this local Hoboken newspaper, the Police Gazette. They gave him $10 as a reward for winning this contest for it. And that's the legend anyway. Is that true? We never really know, but that is the most common story that's told about the Rob Roy. We just had Peggy Sampson join the chat. Hello, Mom. Happy Mother's Day. Great to see you. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Love you very much, Mom. Happy Mother's Day. And so really the sweet vermouth is the number one ingredient that can hold up to the Scotch in this cocktail. And so this is not something we're going to see like, oh, let's try a different cocktail that uses dry vermouth instead of sweet vermouth, like the Old Pal that we made last night. It's just not going to work with the Scotch. But let's get going. And here we're going to start with 2 ounces of our Scotch. And because I'm going a little bit crazy today, I'm using this, the Ardbeg Wigadale. Positive that I said that wrong, but it is a super peaty, strong Scotch that is going to have no problem coming through in this cocktail. And the question really is, what do the other ingredients bring to it that's going to make this better than just drinking this all by itself? And let's see. I've had this bottle forever. To be honest, it's a little peatier than I usually like, so I'm hoping that this might be a good way to use some of it up in this delicious cocktail where the peat gets tempered a bit and toned down by the other ingredients. So we're going to use an 8-to-3 ratio, so we have 2 ounces of our Scotch, and I'm going to use 3/4 of an ounce of my homemade sweet vermouth. Give that a quick little shake. Beautiful. And next I'm going to put in a couple dashes of beard bitters. So we're getting pretty much a Manhattan, but with Scotch instead. Scotch Manhattan. Let's add our ice. I'm going to put the rest of this ice in the freezer so that it does not continue to slowly melt. And let's give this a little stir. How is sweet vermouth made? Great question. So sweet vermouth is a fortified wine, and so you start with the fortification. So I take 6 ounces of vodka, and for 24 hours I infuse that vodka with a variety of spices and barks and herbs, and a little bit of orange zest. Then after 24 hours I strain that out. And then I caramelize some sugar, which is where sweet vermouth gets not only its sweetness and its color from. I also make some hibiscus tea from dried hibiscus leaves, which also add a beautiful red color. And then basically you just combine the infused vodka, the caramelized sugar, the hibiscus tea, and then white wine. I use a Pinot Grigio. Literally just shake that up and you're good to go. What I didn't realize until I started making it was the sweet vermouth and dry vermouth both have a white wine base, right? I hadn't really thought too deeply about it, but I always thought like sweet vermouth uses red wine and dry vermouth uses white wine. Not the case, but rather the sweet vermouth gets the sweetness and the color from the caramelization of the sugar, which I thought was interesting. I am going to strain this with my julep strainer into my chilled coupe glass. And this is definitely a cocktail that can withstand the rigors of a strong garnish. So I'm going to spear 2 Luxardo cherries. If I can get them out. I always have some trouble with this. Let's use my spoon. One cherry. 2 cherries. Beautiful. Let some of those juices go away. And there we have the Rob Roy. I think we've had Keith enter the chat. Hello, Keith. Good to see you. So I can smell this from here. You know, maybe a mistake to go with this super forceful peaty whiskey, and maybe or Scotch, and maybe I could have even upped the sweet vermouth to withstand that a little bit. But let's give it a taste and see if I get anything except peat from this cocktail. A lot of peat on the nose, a lot of smokiness. Okay. So I'll say this, it tastes different from just drinking the Scotch on its own. It is like brightened up a little bit and sweetened up a little bit from the sweet vermouth. I'm not getting too much of the character from the bitters, to tell you the truth, despite my my beard bitters being an exceptional and pretty potent product. I'm sure it's maybe doing something in the background, but I'm not getting much at all from that because everything is just having trouble withstanding the rigors of the Ardbeg Scotch. All right. So I think the lesson here is you're going to need to play around a little bit with your ratios in order to match the sweet vermouth that you're using and the Scotch that you're using to get the sweetness level right, to get the smokiness level right. And you know, those ratios might shift and change in order to find that balance that you want. But here we have 2 classic Scotch drinks. The Highball prepared the traditional ritualistic Japanese way, and then the Rob Roy to our left here. And that's all we got. Last thing I want to do is give a little, in addition to Mother's Day, today is also my friend Carolyn's birthday, Philippe's wife, and wanted to wish her a happy birthday. And earlier today, Philippe had let me know that she was going to be doing her 100th Peloton ride today on the bike, in addition to it being her birthday today. And so Philippe's like, hey, if you want to like get on the bike at the same time, I think she's doing this live ride at 1 o'clock. A lot of times when you do the live ride, when it's either your birthday or like what they call a milestone ride, 100, 200, 300, etc., they'll give you a little shout out in the ride. And so Philippe told me like, oh, she's doing this Ally Love ride at 1 o'clock. And obviously when everything shut down in New York, the Peloton studios had shut down too, back in the middle of March. And so they weren't really doing many live rides for a while, but then they realized like, oh, like let's just send bikes to our instructors. And then I'm sure they set up with other infrastructure too for their houses and apartments. And so a lot of instructors have been doing rides from home, where, you know, they'll like be in their living room on their bike and they'll have all the tech and everything from there. So Ally Love, who's one of the more popular instructors on Peloton, was doing this ride today. She's been doing this every Sunday half-hour ride live from her home. And so Carolyn was doing this ride at 1 o'clock. I got on, I gave her a little virtual high five. She high-fived me back. Everything was going fine. But then she suddenly the like audio from Ally on the bike, like you could still hear the music, but you couldn't hear anything she was saying. And I'm like, oh no. And then it got really staticky, and I'm like, oh no, like they're having all sorts of technical difficulties. And then the screen just went blank. And it said like, we are experiencing technical difficulties. We are working our hardest to resolve this as quickly as possible. So that was a disappointment. I feel bad for Carolyn. That this was supposed to be her big birthday milestone ride, and they ended up having technical difficulties with it. But I wanted to take a moment and both express a happy birthday wish to Carolyn, but also send her congratulations on getting to 100 Peloton rides in what's a very short amount of time. I feel like they just got the bike in like December. November or December. They haven't had it for very long. So she's been committed and really working it, and she should be really excited and proud of that. So congrats to Carolyn. Otherwise, I hope that everybody enjoys the rest of their Sunday. And once again, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers here in the chat. Hope you all had a good weekend and continue to have a good weekend until you log on to work tomorrow morning. Remember, the weekend continues until you're back at work on Monday. So don't let that Monday evening jitters get to you tonight. If you need some lubrication or cocktail to help you with that, there's no shame in that at all.
It's 5 o'clock. Why not have a drink with me?
I'm going to be making eggplant parm for dinner. Super excited about that. Hope everybody has a great night. See you soon.